My guest today is going to talk to us about burnout. She combines her understanding of health, nutrition, business really, to coach the most difficult cases, really. Katie Maycock.
I was so successful and I was so happy doing what I was doing. Didn't matter. I just went for it. And I think when you really like it, it's really easy. And most of my clients are like, yeah, but I really love what I do. And I'm like, I get it, but we've got to put some boundaries in there so you don't get sick. And I realised at 27, I couldn't walk up and down stairs. My knees were swollen, my hips were swollen, my hand was swollen. Only time they got better was when I would take 6 months where I couldn't work.
It's so interesting, like 6 to 7 times I would catch the flu every year.
You have to change your beliefs around stress, your perceptions, your behaviours, your actions, your habits, all around that. And it takes time. Focus on one thing. Don't try and do it all at once as well. That's a massive thing. Stress is pretty much the number one thing that you all have in common.
Welcome back. My guest today is going to talk to us about burnout. Katie Maycock is a burnout specialist. She combines her understanding of health, nutrition, business really, and all of the knowledge about stress and what causes stress to coach the most difficult cases, really, the alpha professionals, like, you know, those top entrepreneurs that will always say, hey, but stress is good for me type thing, to find a life that is very successful, but also not as stressful. She's a speaker. She also, trains through her membership, which is Get Your Shit Together. I love that. Basically to help us at large find a way to be successful without the associated burnout. This episode is part of my Unstressable mini-series. If you haven't heard about it, Unstressable, finally the book is coming out, 29th of April in the US, 9th of May in the UK. You can pre-order today. Unstressable is available wherever in your book retailer, online, or in the physical world. Keep your pre-order receipt because you can use that to join our special webinar that we will give to all of those who pre-order, which you can subscribe to on unstressable.com. Where we will spend 2 hours with you, myself and my co-author Alice Law, to discuss the book, the concepts, and listen to your questions on 28th of April, the day before we release in the US. The mini-series on stress will cover many topics. Today is burnout, one of the most important part of it, with Katie Maycock. I hope you enjoy this. Katie, thank you so much for being here. We are, by the way, we forgot to say we are having carrot cake in the podcast and coffee. So this is going to be a delicious podcast, whatever happens. Thanks for being here. When we met, Katie, it was quite an interesting coincidence because we met and then I got, was in October.
Yeah.
And then we said, yes, we're going to do a podcast together. And then I got really busy getting married and falling in love, and then it didn't happen. And now is really the perfect time for it because it aligns perfectly with the launch of Unstressable. But so, what have you been doing for the last 5 months since we met? 4 months since we met.
I have been super busy myself. So I think when I actually caught up with you, it was like, yeah, let's do this podcast. It'd be a great idea. And then I was traveling around the UK anyway, doing talks and speaking at conferences and all that kind of jazz. So I ended up being really busy. And the start of this year has all been about launching the membership, Get Your Shit Together. So
yeah, you were getting your shit together.
I was getting my shit together to get Shit Together launched. Yeah. So yeah, do you know what? This is actually the perfect time myself because I was so busy at the end of last year. I remember I was sitting with my fiance Wolver and I was like, I don't know where this year went, but also I don't know what happened since September of last year. Like it was like I blinked and it was over. So it was crazy. It was a crazy time. But yeah.
So do you personally get burned out with those things?
So I have personally burnt out fully twice, been very close to third time. But I had the unfortunate experience of what I would call cyclical burnout, where I would burn out, not realize what was going on, get better, or get back to a baseline, and then do it all over again. But then my health would just plummet.
That's exactly what happens to me. Exactly.
Yeah.
Actually, I wanted to, when I was thinking that we're finally meeting today. Last year, I got really close twice. No, actually, I should be honest about that. I got really close once. It happens to me twice a year. Because I publish a book almost every other year, right? So publishing a book is such an intensive thing, right? And then end of the year, November is normally where most of my travel happens, and so I normally would get burned out around May and then get close to burnout. But this last year in November, I was so burnt out.
Yeah.
And I'm supposed to be writing a book called Unstressable, right? It's so elusive, isn't it?
It is so elusive. And I think the thing is as well, from what I've learned and from my experience and with working with my clients, is you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know how far you've gone until you kind of take a step back and you relax, and then it all kind of hits you. And especially if you really love what you're doing, because then there's this whole thing where it's like, but I really love what I'm doing. There's this whole misconception that stress is only from bad things, and it's only from the workplace, and it's only from whatever. But at the end of the day, it can be really exciting and good things. Like when I burnt out, I think the first time I burnt out was actually quite young. I was about 25 or 26. And I just started this new career in recruitment. And I went in there and I looked super young, like I was 25, but I looked like I was about 15. And I found out all these people had these bets on me because I was one of the youngest people in the team, one of the only women. And they had all these bets on me when I was going to quit and how I wasn't going to be successful.
Okay.
And I'm one of those people, you go against me, I'm like,
I'm going to get you.
I'm going to prove you wrong. So I busted my butt for months. For about a whole year, I busted my butt. I ended up outbilling everybody. I ended up winning all the sales records. I ended up overtaking people that had been in recruitment for 10 years. And I was like, there we go, I've done that. So I went on this holiday. First 4 days of that holiday, I couldn't get out of bed. I was so sick. I couldn't digest food. I was so fatigued. I had cold sores all over my face. And I was meant to be in Fiji having this like really lovely, summer break. But I think it was more, I was so successful and I was so happy doing what I was doing. Didn't matter. I just went for it. And I think when you really like it is really easy. And most of my clients like, yeah, but I really love what I do. And I'm like, I get it, but we've got to put some boundaries in there so you don't get sick.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so what is burnout? Like, how do you define? I think for many of us, it's a different definition. Like some of us have a very high threshold and some of us don't.
Well, the way I look at it, it's complete physical, mental and emotional exhaustion from prolonged stress. I don't do what the World Health Organization, which they made it a diagnosable syndrome back in 2019. And they said it was only really a workplace phenomenon. And I was like, yeah, but stress, you don't just go, I've stressed from work, I'm going to burn out, and I'm stressed in a relationship, something else is going to happen. No, it's just from prolonged stress. And I think the biggest dilemma with modern day society is that we've just normalized stress, which is good because stress is a part of everyday life. But we've then got to balance it out with how do we manage it, because that's got to become the normalized part rather than going, oh, stress is just a part of everyday life. Like insomnia is fine. Like, these health issues are just normal. It's like, but they're not. Like that's your body letting you know, hey, I'm actually not doing good. I need you to slow down, and actually understanding what slowing down looks like while being successful, because that's the trick. That's the rub right there.
Yeah.
But I think everyone does experience burnout a little bit differently. And I think you're right, we've all got different thresholds. So I always talk about the pressure performance curve, and I talk about how we do need pressure to perform to a certain level, right? Every single person's pressure performance curve is unique to them.
Yeah.
So whatever you've gone through in your life, every step that you've taken to get you where you are right now is going to contribute to that pressure performance curve or that pressure threshold. And everyone's going to have a different experience. And that's why it's really difficult when you meet somebody going, well, I can do that, why can't you? Or when you look at somebody, well, you can do that, why can't I? It's like, well, we've got different experiences. We've had to collect a whole lot of different experiences in our life to get to where we are.
So let me ask you about this while you have a bite of that cake.
Yes.
The pressure performance curve is basically for for all of us, when you have a little more pressure, you perform a little better and a little better and a little better. So the more pressure, the better you perform, and then it breaks.
Yeah.
Right? There is a point where you add more pressure, and the additional pressure really makes you perform worse.
Yeah. So
right?
What happens is you kind of tip from pressure into stress. That's how I like to visualize it, because I think, it's obviously a bell curve. It's not obviously, it is a bell curve. And so you can kind of go up, and then when it starts to dip, I would actually say that sort of like there's a dipping point where you start to go into that stress. And usually when you look at what's the difference between pressure and stress, because we use them interchangeably a lot of the time. I always say pressure is working towards working towards a goal, a target, deadline, whatever it is. It can be anything, right? Understanding it's completely determined on your own performance and your own actions and behaviors, whatever it is. Stress is exactly the same thing, but you're lacking a resource of some sort. So that could be energy, it could be time, it could be skills, it could be support, it could be rewards, recognition, all that kind of stuff. And so the first step I always say to people, especially in the workplace, take a step back and see where you are right now and understand, am I working well under pressure? If you can tick a box going, yep, I have all the energy. Yep, I have time to do what I need to do. Yep, I have all the skills that I need right now to do what I need to do. I have all the support that I have got, and I'm getting the recognition and the rewards that I need. You're working well under pressure. The minute one of those 5 things drop,
you're into stress.
And then when you're under stress for a prolonged period of time, you go to burnout.
This is brilliant. So, the way my brain works, of course, is always mathematics and physics, right? So
yes.
when I wrote Unstressable and I was working with Alice is a beautifully feminine being in terms of how she deals with stress, right? I am annoyingly very process-oriented and logical in everything that I do. And basically, at the very early start of the book, I was trying to explain exactly that. So I used physics. I basically said, look, we know what stress is. This is how physicist brains work. It's like, we know what stress is. It is force, divided by the square area of the, cross section of the object being stressed. And she was like, yeah, what does that mean? What does mean anything? And I was like, no. Yeah, the square area of the object is the resource available to the object to handle the external force. It's as simple as that, right? So stress is not the force applied, okay? It's what you call pressure. It is the force applied divided by the resources. And if the resources are not enough, that's when you start getting stressed.
Yep.
Right? And then, stress in itself is not bad, because then you may try to seek those resources and bring them in, but then you let that, that sort of stress continue and linger, and you're literally almost paralyzing your parasympathetic nervous system by basically killing yourself slowly, because you start to seek those resources from your sleep and from your rest and from your workout and from and so your liver functions start to reduce, your kidney functions start to reduce, and you end up in a place where your body goes like, no, can't do that anymore, right?
Yep.
And that's when burnout breaks us, basically.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest thing with burnout, it can happen, there's no unique amount of time it takes for you to get there.
Yeah.
Right? It can take years, it can take decades, it can take months, depending on your perception of that stress or how intense that stress is and how long you go without those resources. Like, I burnt out in my 20s, but I was really close in my teenage years, like in my early 20s as well. I was really, really close. I put so much pressure on myself. And one of the things that I always talk about is a lot of the times it's our belief around the stress and some of the beliefs we've created around how we perceive ourselves, how we perceive work, how we perceive, success, all that kind of stuff. That can all play into this. But I think there's no end point and there's no age limit to burnout. Yeah. I think we're going to see a big push in teenagers and kids getting burnt out. I think we're going to see a big push of
100%, yeah. The pressure we put on them.
100%.
Yeah.
Social media, everything.
And no resources, really.
Their parents don't know what resources they need, so how can they give it to their kids? And I think this is the biggest thing, when we look at how, I look back at how I perceived stress when I was young. I always thought it was a really positive thing. If you spoke to me when I was 24, 25, I would have told you I thrive under stress. I would have told you I'm just an anxious person. It is who I am. I function really well under it. And outwardly I did. And outwardly, I was successful. But inside, my body was screaming. There was so much going on physically, mentally, and emotionally for me that I wasn't okay. But I think that we don't understand that sort of flip. We don't understand that, yes, although stress can be good, it can't be the only thing. Like I would have said my persona, I would have said my personal traits was that I function well under stress, put me in any situation, I'll succeed. I mean, I was doing a double degree, I launched my first business, I was hiring my first people before I'd even graduated. That wasn't healthy for me physically. At the end of the year, when I took a bit of a break, I ended up in hospital with kidney stones.
Oh my God.
And I was young, I was 22. Like that's a really young age to get sick. I was having shingles. I was getting all these things that somebody my age should not have gotten. And when I speak to my clients now, they all have similar, and maybe not the exact same physical health issues, but they're having these physical health issues. And that's usually one of the first warning signs, right? That you're not doing okay. But we leave it. We wait until we're, emotionally and mentally completely tapped out before we actually start doing anything.
I want to ask why that is, but I also want to ask, why are you that way? Like, what makes someone so driven at such a young age?
So I think it depends. Like we can go back to childhood. I mean, I go back to my childhood, and I grew up probably very similar to a lot of millennials, where my parents worked full time. They were both just emotionally not available. Like they were physically there. They were like, here's your food, here's like the house that you can live in, but emotionally don't come to me with them. So it was kind of one of those situations where both parents was like, don't get too excited because that's annoying because then you're loud, but don't be too sad because I don't know how to deal with that, because they didn't know how to deal with it themselves, right? And they were so busy that in my mind, I wanted to see when my parents would actually recognize that I was doing a good job. Like, I mean, I would go to school, I could get A's, and they were like, yeah, but that's just what you're meant to do, right? Like, there was no like, well done, you're doing a really good job. And so I was like, I remember when I was 15, I was really bad at school. I got sat down at the end of year 10 and they said, we don't think school's for you, because I was such a naughty kid. They were like, just please leave. Like, please don't come back.
You're stressing us.
Like, you're so naughty. You're in detention all the time. You keep getting suspended. Please don't come back. And I remember in that moment, I was 15, and I remember it was like this visual, like I started visualizing like a fork in the road. And I was like, I could go the easy route, which would be to leave school, get a job, and do all that kind of stuff. Or I could stay and try and get a better education, so I gave myself more options to go to university. Not saying you have to go to university, but millennials got taught that. We got taught that you had to go to university if you wanted to have a good career. And I remember in that moment, I was like, it's going to be really tough. And I did that, but I also remember thinking, like, I wonder if my parents will start recognizing that I'm going to work really hard to get into university, because neither of my parents got into university. I was the first person in my whole family to go to university. And I kind of put that amount of pressure on myself then, which came with a whole array of other issues. But I think it was more, I had to be successful to get that sort of approval from my parents. But I was also terrified of having to rely on anyone. I was terrified of having to rely on a single soul. So I thought to myself, do not rely on anyone. You can only rely on yourself. Go for it. And then it was just kind of that way until probably I met my fiance, if I'm being really honest with you.
Tell me more.
So I met my fiance over like 9 years ago now. So we've been together for quite some time, and he is the complete opposite to me. Like, he's very driven, but he's just a chill dude. Like, he's just like, I always said, it's like you skip through a field of daisies. And he's just a happy-go-lucky kind of guy. And I started seeing the world, I started seeing the world the way he saw the world, which was to slow down. You didn't need to rush.
You're speaking on Slo Mo. I mean, like, that's the whole idea, yeah?
And, I met him as I was going through my second burnout. And bless him, like, I remember waking up and I had this cold sore that started from the bottom of my lip, that went down to the bottom of my chin. It went up my jawline, around my ear, went in my ear.
Oh, wow.
And it was horrifying to look at in the mirror. Like, I woke up and I knew I had a cold sore. And I was like, okay, go look in the mirror and inspect the damage. Because I was getting cold sores all the time. So I was like, how bad is this one? And I remember looking at myself in the mirror and I was like, oh, that's a bad one. And I had to, like, call my manager. I was like, I don't think I can come into work. She's like, why? I'm like, I've got a really bad cold sore. And she's like, oh, you always say your cold sores are really bad. I'm like, no, this one will take the cake, I promise you. And I took a picture, sent it to her, and she was like, okay, I'll see you in a week.
That's not a nice thing to say.
No, but it was fair. Like, I'll show you the picture. It was intense. But I remember sending it to my fiance. Now, my fiance is a 6 foot tall man. He's extremely handsome. So I'm sending this picture of like me looking so vulnerable. I looked, honestly, like I had this cold all over my face. And I sent it to him and I was like, I really think I've really screwed up. Like I really think I stressed too much. And he looked and he goes, you still look beautiful to me. And I was like, you're a keeper.
That man we need on this podcast.
Yes, So he's just the kind of guy that just, you know, you have to dawdle with him. Like you have to just take it slow. If I go for walks with him, a walk that might take me 45 minutes by myself will guarantee take me 2 hours because he wants to stop, he wants to chat, he wants to slow down. He's just so opposite to me. And he's the first person that kind of let me be vulnerable because I'm not naturally a vulnerable person. He let me be vulnerable and he let me start working through. I don't think I deal with stress very well. I was suffering really badly from anxiety, but I never let anybody know. And I started sort of talking about, you know, how I perceived the world. And he was like, that's a really dark place. That's a really dark place. And so he started just sort of helping me work through how I saw things and how I was seeing them from a perception that was just quite skewed. But, you know, perception is reality. So it was my reality for a long period of time. So yeah, he kind of just helped me slow down, realize that things are okay. And I was able to be vulnerable with him. And it was a trust. I was able to trust him with my emotions instead of going, that's nice, dear, go away. He was like, okay, tell me a bit more. Like, what's going on? Like, how did you get to there? Like, he was really, he was just one person that just took the time to really look me deep into my eyes and go, I really want to understand you. And so that was kind of the moment where, oh, okay, I don't have to do life completely by myself. Like, I don't have to not rely on anyone. Like, he is somebody that's reliable. So, yeah, that changed a lot when I met him. It took me years. Do not get me wrong. Like, it's been, like, bring him on the podcast and he will tell you that I was definitely a tough nut to crack. But I think when you are able to recognize that you can trust yourself, you can trust other people, and you can be vulnerable, that was just something that was really powerful for me.
Okay, I'm going to pause here for a second and make an announcement for the men listening to this podcast. This is it, honestly. So the idea of allowing your woman, if you're in a straight relationship, to be vulnerable and to listen and to accept and to be a little rock-like. You know, things don't change with the fluctuations of events. I think that really takes the cake. Honestly, that is the jackpot. So yeah, back to stress. This idea of you changing, right? I think is the core of what you and I advocate. It's that it doesn't have to be that way. That there is a belief system.
Yes.
There is maybe a bit of fear, maybe a bit of anxiety that drives you to behave in certain ways that lead you to that constant stress that leads you to burnout. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. So again, I'm a visual person, so the way my brain sees it and the way I see it, it's when you're working from a place of stress and you believe that you are only successful because of that stress. And don't get me wrong, that was a belief system that I had. It's nearly every single one of my clients have, where stress equals success because you've been proven that.
Yeah.
But something that I see it as well when you live in that world is that you're running towards success, but you're also sprinting away from failure, so that you never get the opportunity to take a step back and to stop and take a deep breath. Because if you're sprinting away from failure, because that's the thing, that you're scared of failure, right? But you're sprinting towards success. Where's the break? But if you're just strolling towards success, you can take that step, take that pause and take a deep breath, and you're not having to worry about the failure and the fear there, because I think there's, that's something that's really big there. And I think a lot of people also use stress and work as a distraction from things that are going on inside. That was a massive one for me.
100%.
So I think a lot of the times we've got to, I remember I meditate in a different way. So for me, meditation is allowing my thoughts to sort of
I
just,
do that as well. Yeah.
I have to. Otherwise, like, I'll work through the day, then I'll get into bed, and then my brain will be like, here are all the thoughts we want you to have.
I've been keeping them for you.
So now I have to meditate just to be like, listen to my thoughts and decide, call a bit of BS on the ones that are limiting you or limiting me. I'm like, where'd that thought come from? Like, you can go somewhere else. I'm not dealing with that. But that's how I had to do it. And I think a lot of people need to give themselves that space.
Yeah, I call it Meet Becky. So, I call my brain Becky, and basically it's quite interesting because you're spot on. Huh? You have to let those thoughts out. It's almost like some kind of a purge or a cleanse, right?
Yeah.
And they pop up, and it is a form of meditation, by the way. One form of meditation is to become aware of what you're aware of, but it's a very high level of meditation. You can simplify it by saying, okay, I'm just going to listen to my thoughts, acknowledge them, write them on a piece of paper, and basically keep my brain encouraged to bring them up until they run out. Right?
Yep.
And the model I use is simply after every thought I say, okay, I listened, you want me to call my daughter. Lovely, I love my daughter. Right? And, and then I say, what else? And as you keep doing this, your brain eventually goes like, that's it, nothing else. Have nothing, right? And it's quite interesting when you get to that point, you get the true meaning of peace, where your brain has nothing to say. You're not trying to slow it down through normal meditation. It just has nothing to say, right? The trick, however, is that a lot of those thoughts are bullshit.
I would say 99% are really 100%. Bullshit.
And I normally take a pen and I scratch them out visibly in front of my eyes to tell my brain, oh, that's stupid. Don't say that again. Right? Yeah. And so the next time my brain brings that up, I get that vision in my eyes and I go like, we said we're not going to say that again. Where did that come from? Right? The thing, however, is the main premise, if you don't mind me saying, you said so many valuable things in that sentence. The main premise that we perform better under stress is bullshit.
It's bullshit.
Yeah, I mean,
no,
what happened to flow? What happened to if you're a guitarist, right? Why do you need? You need to be in flow. You need to enjoy playing the guitar. Yeah. So if you're an artist, we perform better under inspiration, right? Where is that? The man in striped suit crossing his arm and appearing very serious and like, yeah, you'll only perform better under stress. Where does that come from?
Do you know what? It's so hard. I think, when I think about it, I think we started to break it. I've got to go back to when we started to break it. I think we started to break it around 5-10 years ago. I think we started realizing that's not how things were, but I don't know where it started. I don't know if it was back in the 50s when there was no wars and we sort of came to this point. It was like, you've got to, like I've seen, it's like, I don't know whether it's greed. I don't know what
it is. Definitely. Remember that Charlie Chaplin black and white movie when he's on the production line?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And they speed the production line a tiny bit so that he, just, because basically if you hire a shoemaker and they can make 13 shoes a day, and, you push them a little and they make 14. That's pure profit for you.
100%.
And I think that's where it comes from.
I do think there's a grade to it. Probably capitalism hasn't helped. I will say that. But I also think there's this lack of emotional awareness. I know we talk about emotional intelligence, but I think it's now just a word that's thrown out around, especially in the corporate place where it's like, oh, emotional intelligence, you've got to have the soft skills. It's like, no, what we're talking about is being aware of our emotional standpoint. I always say our emotions are like a compass to let us know how we're doing. Yeah. Look, they're not always going to point us in the right direction, but it's going to let us know, hey, you didn't like something about this situation, figure out why you don't like it and don't just put it to the side, which I think is a normal setting. Well, that was my normal setting for a long period of time. But I think when it comes to especially the corporate place, there's been no space for your emotions. There's There's no space for you to go, hey, I didn't like that, but I don't know why, or whatever. There's no space. And I think that's the biggest. I think if you can couple your emotions, but I think we've been taught, well, I was definitely taught at a really young age, like emotions are a weakness. You don't need them. There's no place in the workplace for it. I mean, when I went into corporate, I was told, leave it at the front door, don't talk about it, they're useless, it won't help you getting to, helping you move forward. And I took that literally. Like, I'm a literal person, so you tell me something literally, I will take it, and I will take it to heart, and I will live in that world. And so I would find myself in these situations and someone else would come into them going, that's really bad. And I'd be like, is it? Like, I didn't know.
I was told it wasn't.
Or I would be like, the minute I'd get this, like, an uncomfortable feeling of that's not right, I'd be like, put it to the side. There's no space for this to work through. But I think there's this greed and I think there's this fear of emotions, because I think people haven't tapped into them, that it's now foreign for a lot of people. They're like, it's also got this bad taboo around it. Like, you don't want to be too emotional. You don't want to show, you don't want to come across weak. You don't want to become across like you don't know something. Like, how many times have we told in an argument, if you're having an argument, maybe a heated discussion, don't allow your emotions in because you'll lose all credibility. It's like, well, maybe that should just be a point of going, actually, we've gone a little bit too far. Maybe we need to take a step back, take a deep breath and revisit it. But we don't do that. We go, you've lost all credibility in that argument, on that conversation.
So are you pro bringing emotions into arguments?
Yeah. I think emotions are important. I think it's a torment. Like, I think it's...
They're the reason for the argument.
Exactly. Exactly. I think that, you have to be able to say to people, this is how I feel and this is what's going on, rather than going, I don't want to hear about your feelings. I want to hear about logic. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, I need to figure out why I feel this way. Like, you can bridge the gap.
Oh my God, Hannah and I were having that conversation yesterday. It's quite interesting because I was the one that was saying, we ended up in a very interesting place, which was, if the conversation we have is about facts, then logic matters and data matters, right? So if I say, 50% of brunettes are, taller than 180 centimeters, whatever crap that I can bring up in my logical brain, arguing that should say, hold on, no, that's actually probably not true, because if you look at A, B, and C and data and so on, that's, not a very lover's conversation, but facts are important, right? Then if it is in the emotional part, then I think emotions are the primary thing to bring into the conversation. It's just a question of how do you bring them into the conversation, right?
And I think the dilemma that we've got is that people don't know how to talk. They don't know how to use their emotions to communicate effectively, because you think about the emotional part of the brain, it's really hard to get that information to the logical language part of the brain. And I think people haven't been taught to do it as a young child. You're crying, stop crying. You're angry as a child, stop being angry. There's no talking through. It's like, okay, why are you crying? Like, what's going on? I had to learn that at the age of 30. Like, I had to learn at 30 that I'm not an ice queen. As much as that was my nickname when I was in my 20s, I was called the Ice Queen, because nothing really fazed me. I never really had an emotional reaction to anything. But I had to start recognizing I'm actually really angry, and then actually following that with like, well, why am I angry? Like, what about this is making me angry? Yeah. And then really bringing it down to that, rather than getting hijacked by emotions, being more curious about my emotions. And I think so many people get hijacked, and they allow that hijacking rather than to go, oh, hang on a second, I'm a bit angry. Let me just, spend some time figuring this out. But you need somebody there that's willing to take a step back and allow you to figure out as well. And that's why I say Wolver has been very, very good with that. Do not get me wrong. We've had our conversations around emotions as well. He was a highly emotive person, and that was very interesting for me. And so I think there was this element of like recognizing when the emotions are getting hijacked, when you're getting hijacked by that.
What do you mean by that?
So when you get so angry and you can't control yourself, like, so you're screaming, you're shouting, and there's nothing really another person can do other than just go, you can't say calm down because it's going to make you more angry. But do you know what I mean? Give that person their space. But you're not going to have a constructive conversation from that, and you've probably been hijacked. Then your brain's going to be giving you all this information of whatever it is. Like, let's say you're having a fight with your partner, and then your brain goes, it's because he doesn't love you anymore. It's because he's seeing somebody else. It starts giving you all this information that's not true. But because you're getting hijacked by emotions, your brain's trying to find all the reasons why you're feeling such strong things. It's like, maybe it's this, maybe it's this, maybe it's this. And then you go off on a massive tangent, and it's really hard to come back from that point. Yeah. Right? But if you can stop from getting to that point and go, oh, hang on a second, I'm getting quite frustrated in this conversation. Let's figure out what's frustrating me in this conversation and go down that way. Then you can kind of have a constructive conversation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was writing about that yesterday, believe it or not, in my very mathematical way. If your response is disproportionate to the event that triggers it, then your response is a response to the event plus your trauma.
Yes.
Okay, so there is, if I tell you, hey, long hair suits you, and you respond in a way that is like, don't judge me by my hair. It's not because I said long hair suits you. It's because you have a trauma somewhere that, you don't want to be judged by your appearance, right?
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting when if you become aware of this, you would take the opportunity when your emotions are heightened to immediately tell yourself, hold on, what's triggering this? Right?
Yeah.
It's not like he really kicked me in the eye. He didn't do that, so I don't need to attack him that much, or I don't need to attack her that much. I think my biggest teacher on the topic, you can have a bite of cake now, is my daughter, يا حبيبتي. For a very long time, actually, and maybe until her mid-20s, was convinced somehow that I don't want her to express her emotions. And then we went through a very interesting hypnotherapy of some sort. And it was a moment when she was 5 or 6 where, if I remember correctly, we were driving and then an insect flew into the car. And so I stopped the car on the side and then I captured the insect in a tissue paper. Right? And just because I'm an annoying man, really, I am. I don't know why I did this. I did a practical joke and I said, baby, it's okay. It's just an insect. And then I took another tissue paper and pretended to eat it. Okay? And Aya exploded crying. Okay? And so I attempted to explain and I kept saying, baby, it's okay. I swear it's in the other one. This was just a joke. This was just a joke. There's no need for you to cry. And she took at that age, there is no need for you to cry, as literal, as no, inside her. And when she explained that to me after that session, I was blown away because inside her as a child, she felt that there was a reason to cry. There was a very big reason to cry, but that daddy is saying, don't cry. And so they are not matching, right? And somehow, you would start to get that feeling that daddy doesn't want to know what you're feeling, right? And I, of course, not to take the blame off me, of course, I am a very busy business executive my whole life. I don't have time for emotions. I want logic. I want things to progress and so on. So I didn't always give the space. But our relationship got so much closer. I always loved her more than life itself. But you can easily, visibly see how much closer we became since I said, hold on, no, I want to hear everything.
Yeah.
Right? And the more she shares her emotions with me, the closer we get. And the less any tension in the relationship at all happens. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. And I think that's something that a lot of people have got to understand. And I remember, this is when we come back to the belief systems, right? We create our belief systems at a really young age, and it can be really little things.
Yeah.
Like parents create our beliefs, teachers create our beliefs, community, society, social media now, unfortunately, but that is what it is. And we create these beliefs. And if we can hear one thing when we're really little and we take it literal, because kids are literal. I'm somehow still literal myself. Did I ever grow up? No. And we take that and then we personify that into the rest of our life. Like, dad doesn't want to see my emotions. That's just one little thing. And that's how easy it can be to create a belief from one thing. And you can tell your parent that as an adult and they go, oh, that's not what I meant, though. It's like, well, when I was 5, I've been like this for 30 odd years. So I think, and there's something whenever I get really angry, because I don't get angry, and if I am really angry, it's like something's really like pissed me off and I have to break it down. And usually it's because I've brought some baggage in. I'm like, oh no, I'm bringing baggage in. And that's what I say to Wolf. I'm like, oh no, sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm bringing some baggage in. That's not fair. Let me leave that at the door and let's have the conversation of what's actually happening. And I think a lot of people just don't recognize that. And I think that is something that I wish people just would be able to have that ability to take a step back.
Yeah.
Start listening to the words that they're saying and kind of go, where'd that come from? Like, why do I think like that? Like, where's that? Rather than just sort of doing what I would do is just be dismissive, like, I don't have to deal with that.
Yeah,
like
I know what I know. It is my truth, and you have to live with it. Yeah.
I always talk about that I'm queen of compartmentalization, like, and I'm still good at it. But what I would do is I'd compartmentalize anything that I didn't want to deal with.
Yeah.
And put it somewhere. I'm like, I'm going to deal with that. So I don't know where you're going to go.
Where's the attic? Where's the attic? Yeah, yeah. You stay there. Yeah.
So I would do that. And then what I learned was, over, it could be months, it could be years, I would explode.
Yeah.
I would explode. And that was a big reason on my burnout as well. I didn't deal with things.
That's so important.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people do that. Or they discredit how big those things are. That was something that I always also used to do. And a lot of my clients do that. Something really big would have happened. And maybe at that time I didn't get the response of like, that was a really big thing that happened. So I'd be like, okay, it wasn't a big thing. So don't talk about it. You don't need to let anyone know. So I'd file it away.
Yeah,
but it was obviously really important to me. And I just was like, put it to the side. Good and bad things I would do that with.
Yeah, I had a very unusual experience mid last year. I started to get a very strange infection in my gum in a tooth that I had treated with a root canal like 15 years before. And, I go to the dentist and it was a very big thing and it was endless pain. Like I had 3 weeks of endless pain. I couldn't sleep. Oh. And eventually this incredible dentist finds a way to reopen the root canal, which is a very sensitive thing to do, and clean it. And then eventually he tells me, do you know why all of that happened? And I said, no, why? And he said, because there was a tiny cotton that was left in that root canal. But you keep that tiny cotton for 15 years, right? And all hell breaks loose, right? So those little things, they could be tiny, really, don't make any difference. But if you leave them over time, they just build up until you explode.
Yeah.
And when you talk about burnout, it's you say it's the prolonged presence of stress. I also say it's the repetitive presence of stress. So Alice would write about that in the book, the idea that it's just your wake up alarm. Yeah. If it's annoying and too loud and it jolts you out of bed every morning, and you keep doing that every morning. It's a tiny bit of stress. On its own, if life was amazing and after that alarm you went and sat on a beach and it was a beautiful island and you're surrounded by, amazing lovers that really treated you like a king or a queen or whatever, and pineapples, that always part of that image, then the alarm wouldn't be a problem. But you add that alarm to the commute, to the this, to the that, and then, it just blows up.
Well, it's I would say more often than not, people burn out because of all the little things over time, right? Yes, there can be those big things, right?
Yeah, it's always the little things, right?
But I would say the real true, like we can talk about carer burnout, we can talk about parent burnout, which is obviously can be big things, right? Like being a carer for somebody that's, in their final stages of life, that will most people that go through that, they're going to be burnt out.
Yeah.
But we're talking the people that I work with, we can't look back at one pivotal moment in time where they're like, it was that stress that caused me to burn out. It's the beliefs that they've created, the behaviors that they've then created from those beliefs, their actions that they started doing, the outcomes that they're working towards. And it's just this consistent thing that it's all the little things that they do. So that, not getting as much sleep. Okay, that's, I didn't get as much sleep tonight, but that's okay. I overworked out at the gym or didn't work out at all, or I didn't see my family. And it's all these little things that then change your behavior, which then is going to change how you perceive the world, which is then going to change the outcome, which is going to have such a profound impact on your physical well-being, right? Stress is, I would say stress, the best way to understand if you're not coping well with stress is just physically look how you're doing. Go inwards. That's the first sign.
That's a very clear first sign.
That's a clear first sign. But I think what happens is, what do we do when we don't feel well? We go to the doctors, right? Just diagnose me with something. But
it's not my problem. I'm not doing anything wrong. Just fix me.
Yeah, give me some meds. Make me feel better. And the doctors can do that, they can give you antibiotics, they can give you medicine, whatever they think might help you, or what you think might help you. You do you kind of thing. But if you don't deal with the root cause, which is that stress, you're never going to physically get better. So your physical health issues will just progressively get worse and worse and worse, and you'll get more and more vague health issues. And this is what we're seeing. So I actually started my career as a nutritionist, and I ended up being a gut health specialist because I would say 80%, maybe 85% of my clients that came to see me had gut health issues.
Yeah.
So IBS, allergies, intolerances. That was my life. Like I had all those gut health issues too. And emphasizing my business is called Get Your Shit Together, literally and figuratively. But, you know, it was one of those things, you know, you think about your gut, you think about, not everyone who burns out has gut health issues, but that was just something that I was seeing at the time. And when I was speaking to these people, they were like, you know, I just got IBS, it's all this. And when you look at what IBS is, it's doctors going, I actually don't know what's wrong with you, so I'm just going to diagnose you with irritable bowel syndrome, right?
Yeah.
And one of the medications that they give you to you know, help you treat, there we go, thank you for the word, treat IBS is anti-anxiety medication.
No way.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So, but if you look at, so many people like I always look at like, well, why? Like, why? What's happening with your gut? And it was really embarrassing. Like I burnt out twice and I had a double degree in nutrition and physiology. So I actually technically should have known what was going on, but I still ignored it. But I think a lot of people forget that. But when I was looking at these gut health issues that people having, like allergies, intolerances, like people having Crohn's disease at high, like, you know, more than we've ever seen, ulcerative colitis, all these health issues. And like, you know, you go back 15 years ago, that's when we started seeing people going like, oh, I can't eat wheat, I can't eat dairy, I have all these allergies, intolerance, whatever it is. And when you look at stress and what it does just solely to the gut, like we can look at immunity and inflammation as well, but if we look solely just what it does to the gut, if you are constantly under stress, your body is going to go, you know, we've got the fight or flight response, which is an automatic physiological response to a perceived threat or to a perceived stress. Your body is going to go, well, I'm going to dictate what's important and what's not important. Yeah. Digesting food isn't overly that important right now. And, you know, it takes a lot of blood flow to digest food. So I'm going to actually need that blood flow to my arms, my legs, my brain, so I can keep functioning. And so if you're not digesting food properly, what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah.
IBS, allergies, all of these, you know, gut health issues. So when people talk about the gut-brain axis, like there's a massive conversation to have around that.
Correct.
And that's just gut health. So that's how I got into doing what I'm doing, was just solely working with people with their guts and realizing stress is pretty much the number one thing that you all have in common.
That's very true, actually.
Right.
It's so true. It is so true that, you know, so Alice, when she writes about this, she basically says you would not try to digest your food if you were about to become food, right? So originally the whole stress response is basically a tiger is attacking you, right?
Yes.
So, you know, if you're about to become a steak, you don't digest your steak. Mm-hmm. It's as simple as that,
yes.
right? And so what ends up happening, of course, if you do that for the fight or flight response, the original design of the fight or flight response is it was going to be 10 minutes and then you're either food or you lived. Yeah. Right? And then you calm down, you look at animals and how they behave. After that, a gazelle will shake its body and then move on as if nothing has happened, right? We don't do that.
We don't do that.
Yeah, we stay stressed for weeks on end, months on end.
Years on end.
Years on end.
And, you know, going back to how this started, so I went off on a tangent. But then what happened? So, you know, we living like this for a long period of time, we normalize these health issues as well, right?
Yeah, we accept them. Yeah.
We accept them, we normalize them. And then what happens is they start getting worse. And then we keep going to the doctor to find out these reasons. And then what do we do? Well, I'm stressed out because I don't feel well. Not actually, I don't feel well because I'm stressed.
But it feeds on itself, right?
It feeds on itself. And so people, I say that there's 6 stages to burnout. And, you know, the 4th stage is what I call illness and anxiety because they seem to go together. You're at stage 4. There's 3 stages before you got to that.
What are they, the 6 stages?
The first stage is excitement. So normally what happens with the excitement stage is, let's say you've got a new job or you've started a new project or something really good is happening. You get really, really excited. So you are working really well. You're working really well under the pressure performance curve. You're able to work those long hours. You're probably putting in some more hours there. But the biggest change in that area is probably your behaviors and your habits. So maybe you're not getting as much sleep as you were. Maybe you're missing out on exercise. Maybe you're not eating as healthy as you were. You're creating new habits that are unsustainable, but you don't realize because you've tied working like that and success because you're probably getting positive reinforcement, recognition, all that kind of stuff. So then you kind of go to the second phase of burnout, which is you just have to work a little bit harder. So things aren't coming as easy to you. You're not thinking as clearly.
Yeah.
You're physically, you're just a bit tired. You know, emotionally, you're doing okay, but mentally, that's what's really happening. You're making a couple of really simple mistakes, tiny bit more forgetful, just not as focused as you might have been before.
Hold on, is that the result of you keeping
keeping those
bad habits?
Well, I would say unsustainable habits, right? We can call them bad, good, but I would just say the unsustainable habits. So what do? You have to mentally and physically put more effort in to get the same results that you were getting in stage 1. That, again, creates more unsustainable habits. And so then you go into stage 3, which is frustration. Because now what's happening is your performance is now dipping because you can't maintain that level of work because it was unsustainable, right? So this is when people are starting to notice there's a bit of a change in you. Maybe you've gone from cool, calm, collected to being outwardly frustrated and aggressive. Or maybe you've gone from being really bubbly, really outgoing to being really withdrawn, or a mixture of the two, right? Physically, you're quite exhausted. Mentally, you're really struggling to just sort of make information make sense, if that makes sense. And so you've got that, you're putting all this pressure on, but you go, I have to get back to where I was at stage 1, instead of actually slowing down and recognizing, all right, obviously this isn't sustainable. I need to get a good night's sleep. I need to get back into a good routine. I need to, cut my hours down at work to make this more sustainable. You do the opposite because you're trying to just be more successful. And because your performance has dipped, you're getting pressure, whether it's from yourself, if you run your own business, pressure from maybe a manager, whoever, right? And that's when you then get to stage 4, which is the illness and anxiety part, where your body's starting to go, look, I was tired before. Now I'm really exhausted. I'm exhausted now. Yeah. And your body's going to start giving you some information around, I'm not doing well, whether it's gut health issues, whether it's really vague health issues. And I think it's the vague health issue. So you can go to the doctor going, I have all these issues. And they go, well, I don't know what that is, because there's no real, there's nothing really I can see. I remember when I was going to the doctors, when I was burnt out, I wasn't digesting food at all. They're like, we don't really know why. We can see you've got inflammation in your bowels. We don't know what it is. We can't tell you which disease you've got, but we can see something, but we're just going to tell you have a functioning bowel disease. I'm like, doesn't make sense, but okay. Then you might be I was also getting cold sores every second week. They couldn't explain that to me. I felt I was getting swollen joints. I was really struggling. And a lot of my clients get this. They get really vague health issues. For my women, their hormones can absolutely go out the window. So their periods become really different. They might have more painful periods, skipping periods, that kind of stuff. For my guys, it's just, they're just not feeling great. It can just be a general malaise, right? And then that's when the anxiety can kick in as well at this stage as well. So there's a massive amount of research that's going into inflammation, and when you're stressed out you have more inflammation, talking about depression, anxiety, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
but also the fact that you still want to go back to level 1 and now you're burdened by all of those illnesses or physical symptoms, basically.
Yeah, and then you've obviously got the outside pressures of maybe you're not performing well, all that kind of stuff. Then you get to the 5th stage, which is apathy. And that's a scary stage. Because you've probably gone from somebody that's extremely motivated, extremely driven, somebody that's very goal-orientated. I mean, these are the clients that I work with, that, nothing really stands in their way. And then now they just sort of wake up and go, I don't care.
Yeah, I don't want this.
I don't want this. And it's not because they don't care. And this is the hardest part to try and get across to people. It's not that you don't care. You do care. But we're talking about this apathy. You don't care about yourself. You don't care about your relationships. You don't care about your work. It's like a general apathy towards everything. But it's not because you don't care. You no longer have the capacity to care, because your brain's gone, I just can't. We've cared about so much stuff. We've cared about your health. We've cared about trying to perform better. We've cared about trying to maintain these relationships. I'm tapped out. I can't keep doing this. And then you get to burnout, which is the accumulation of everything, right? You have that apathy. And what I find with people that get burnt out.
So sort of apathy is the mental symptom, and burnout is like the complete physical symptom.
Physical, mental, and emotional. It's all coupled together. Emotionally, just... I talk about the emotional side, the depression, the anxiety, all that kind of stuff in there that can go with that. And, you've got the mental side, which is you really just can't focus anymore. You can't concentrate. I always try to explain it like this. So I remember going to a meeting when I was extremely burnt out. And I remember sitting there across from somebody. I could see their mouth moving. I could hear the noises, but my brain couldn't turn it into anything meaningful. So I'm like, I have no idea what that person just said. I know you're saying something. I just it sounds like you're speaking a completely different language to me, even though I know you're speaking English. I can't make it out. And I walked out of that meeting just going...
Running out of brain cycles, basically.
I had nothing. I had nothing. And same with emails. I'd get an email. I'm like...
I get that all the time. So seriously, when people send me anything longer than 4 lines, longer than 4 lines, I immediately go like, I don't have the capacity for this.
Oh, 100%. I remember getting one person asked me one thing. I'm like, I'm going to delete that because I'm not going to do that. Like, it was one thing. I'm like, if I delete it, it'll go away.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then come back in the next day and I'm like, nope, delete it again.
Exactly. No, I mean, it's quite interesting actually, which is unfortunately not the nature of... So when people who have very complex difficulties send me something on Instagram or whatever, they will tend to send it to me in a 4 pages thing, right? But the minute it's a 4 pages thing, I can't do it. I don't have the brain capacity to do it. I don't have the seconds in the day to do it. And in my mind, I start to tell myself, look, if you answer this very long message, you have to understand it thoroughly. Otherwise, obviously it's a big topic. You have to really get into it. And if you'd really get into it, you're going to skip answering 80 other people today, which could actually benefit. And so my immediate response is, oh, too long. If I wait, they'll send it again, and then I'll ask them, can you please make it shorter? And then,
Yeah, I think there's an element, though, with that. I from now, for me personally, I have to protect my brain capacity. And I have to protect myself from myself.
Which is a limited resource, right?
It's a limited resource, right? Yeah. So I'm like you, even if I'm not burnt out, if someone sends me like a really long email, I'm like,
fear.
Cup here, paste it into ChatGPT. Give me the basis of what they're trying to say. No, I would never do that. But I think there is. It's
that's
protecting
a great
yourself.
idea.
Yeah, it is a good idea.
I could paste it in ChatGPT and say summarize it.
Summarize it. Give it to me in 2 sentences.
Oh,
I've done that. I have done that before. I said I hadn't, but I have. But it depends on what it is. But again, it comes down to if I don't have the capacity to deal with it, or it's not on my radar for that time being, I can't. And I think that's something that we have to protect our brain capacity. I feel like we forget that we're human.
So this is gold, those 6 stages. I don't go through all of them. Burnout, I know I'm about to burn out for at least a month and a half before I burn out. The challenge with my life, obviously, is that I plan a lot earlier. Like, we're filming this in February, and I am fully booked, believe it or not, until June 20th.
That's crazy. So by June, you're going to be burnt out.
Absolutely. And I know for a fact that, the book is coming out, April 29th and May 9th. And I know for a fact that those 3 weeks will be quite demanding. Okay. And I know that it's coming. But I have, I get pre-booked a very long time before. And so I know that I'm heading there, but I don't get into the anxiety and exhaustion bit. I don't get into...
You skip it until you get to the end part.
Yeah, because I actually am quite in control of my mental state.
Yes.
Right? So I keep working with my brain to understand that we're about... But then, eventually I end up in burnout, which is my physical stress taking over completely.
Yeah.
And, it's funny because on Unstressable.com we have this survey that tells you if your stress is emotional, physical, mental, or spiritual. We call them the four areas. And, when Alice does the survey, her results are, the weakest part of her where she gets stressed most is mental. She thinks about things and that those thoughts would stress her. I am like literally totally in the green in all of them other than physical, which literally flipped tips. So, when I did the survey back in November last year, the physical stress bit, all of the symptoms of physical stress was totally red. Everything's totally green. Like, I'm not mentally stressed about it. I know that I'm killing my body, but, don't know how to stop it.
Yeah, I think that, it's interesting. It's like you've got this absolute control of the emotional, the mental and the spiritual side. You've got that control because you've done so much work on it. But then the physical side,
your
the
body.
thing is with stress, here's what I always say, regardless if you perceive it as a good stress or a bad stress, right? your body is not going to know
100%.
that. So that's probably what's happening, because it's for you, it's probably like, this is all fun. Like, this is great. I get to meet people. I get to launch a book. I get to do all these really exciting things. So for you, you're filling your cup emotionally, spiritually, and mentally, because you're having these, you're having all these amazing conversations. It doesn't matter though, because your body's still like, yeah, it doesn't matter that we don't perceive it as good or bad. It is just what it is. And I think that is
obviously
so crucial for a lot of people to understand.
Obviously, my body is like, yeah, we love this. This is amazing.
Yeah.
But you haven't worked out for 2 weeks. We haven't eaten anything proper for the last 4 days. You're not really taking care of your sleep. I need that shit, man. Like my body will go like,
I say sleep is the great reset. Like, it usually balances everything else out. But if you don't do those things, like, I'm one of those people, I get really excited. So I can
see.
I'm an excitable person. So if I've got a project that I want to do, I naturally will accidentally fall into not taking care of myself. The one thing that I had made a really big promise to myself was it last year? Could have been last year or the year before. I can't quite remember. But I promised myself I would never sacrifice my sleep, because my sleep was such a massive, like, I'm somebody that used to have insomnia. So what's really interesting when you've had insomnia, what you learn very quickly is you can function on very little to no sleep.
Yeah.
And you can achieve really amazing things on little to no sleep. So I took that. And so when I don't sleep well, because I do have moments where I don't sleep well sometimes, but I said I remember to myself, I'm like, that's when my body will be screaming at me because of the sleep element. Because I'm pretty good with the diet. I'm pretty good with the exercise. The sleep has always been my kryptonite. Achilles heel.
Yeah. It's interesting, because you know for a fact that sleep, believe it or not, regardless of how energized you feel, don't be fooled. I used to sleep 4 to 5 hours a day for months on end in the exciting phase when I joined Google, the first time I joined Google. So I think joining Google back in early 2007 for me was the first opportunity I had to actually change the world. I really felt I was given superpower. And my part of Google was what we used to call the next 4 billion users, basically. So I was bringing information, knowledge. We were basically providing democracy of information to people all over the world that before that had nothing but a national censored TV station. Okay. And it was I was so driven. And I would sleep 4 to 5 hours a day. I think for the first year and a half, I was sleeping 4 to 5 hours a day, fully energized, right? Until I sat next to, I remember it was a flight from Dubai to Jeddah. I was spending probably like 14 hours in Jeddah and then flying again. And I wasn't hungry. When you're on hyper alert, you're not hungry. And so I sit there next to an old guy who looks really grumpy, okay? He really looked grumpy. And then the hostess is offering lunch. I say, no lunch for me, I'll have a coffee. And then she says, sure, brings me the coffee, brings him his starter. Then, she's back with the main course. Do you want to eat something? I said, no, I'll have another coffee. And then when it's dessert time for him, I'm now getting my third coffee. And he says one sentence in the entire 2.5 hours or 3 hours trip. He says, this will make your heart stop. That's it. He didn't say anything else. I swear. Until now, I'm like, he must have had a heart attack or something at a point in time because of stress. And he's sort of giving me advice, but doesn't want to talk too much because he's grumpy. Right? Anyway, I took that very seriously. So I dropped, what was 11 cups of coffee a day at that time. I love coffee. You guys know that.
Coffee too.
Yeah. 11 cups of coffee a day. I dropped to 2. And those 2 were before 10 a.m. every day. And for around 3 weeks, I slept 9 to 10 hours a day.
Wow.
Right? And suddenly you just realize that, you can rev your body, but eventually it will break. And by the way, feeling energized doesn't mean you're doing the right thing.
No. It's what I call probably running on adrenaline, right? Like you're using adrenaline. That's what you were doing, essentially, is that you were just tapping into the adrenaline, the excitement. And adrenaline isn't a limitless source. Right, like and it
has side effects that are horrible.
That's why it's not a limitless source, right? It has massive side effects, and I think
constant fight or flight.
Even though you're perceiving the situation as a positive. This is why my favorite quote is perception is reality. I'll never forget the person that told me where I was, who told me that, and it's stuck with me since I was it's the first day that I went into recruitment. My old director of the company, he sat me down and he goes, Katie, perception is reality. That's all you need to understand about sales. So he was coming at it from a sales standpoint, but I looked at it as no.
Hold on, that's deep.
That's everything. So whenever I'm having an argument with somebody, I'm like, their perception is completely different to mine. How their reality is vastly different to mine.
Yeah.
Please help me understand your perception so I can understand your reality. So I can I have to do that. But I think that, when we come to that point where you perceive stress as such a positive, you even ignore the negative side effects. You're like, oh, I'm a bit tired or whatever. Or oh, I've got a bit of a cold, whatever.
It's a small tax to pay.
Yeah. Or for me, it was oh, I've had the shingles 4 times, whatever.
So interesting. I used to get 6 to 7 times. I would catch the flu every year.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and I would go it's my immunity, or my makeup, or maybe because I used to say I'm a warm weather creature, and so because I'm traveling the West, I'm
the excuses that we've give ourselves. Yeah. I remember when I was in Australia. Obviously, the accent is Aussie.
We've obviously we got that bit.
So that's when I burnt out. The first the 2 times I burnt out.
Is it possible at all for an Australian to lose that accent? Try to speak like a Brit.
So I was actually born in England. So I got to get into it because my mum's British and my dad's Welsh. Mm-hmm. So I was actually born in the UK. You're going to make me just feel so embarrassed, but that's all right. I can probably do a bit of a British accent. I can do one like
perfect.
This. It's not perfect.
No.
Do you know what, though? This is a funny story. So I lived in Vancouver for 18 months.
I love Vancouver.
Beautiful place. But when I moved there, so what I didn't realize about the Americas is that they struggle to understand Aussies, Brits, and New Zealanders.
Yeah.
For very random reasons. One, we actually talk really fast. Which I didn't understand until I moved to North America. But also, Aussies and Brits and New Zealanders don't pronounce R. We don't do so we will say water, not water. So when I moved to Vancouver, I was working in a sales job.
Vancouver, not Vancouver.
I was living there and I remember taking this, I was working at an Equinox gym. I was opening one of the Equinox gyms up there and I was taking this really fancy man around the gym, doing my tour, doing my sales pitch. I get to the end of it. It's been an hour of this person just go, oh, yep, cool, yep, that's great. Giving me the responses I thought were positive. And I sat down, I'm like, so these are the memberships, blah, blah, blah. He goes, look, Kate, I'm just going to stop you. I'm sure what you've said is amazing. I didn't understand a word you said.
Are you Greek?
So in that moment, I had to do this really weird Aussie American accent just so people understood me. I remember my mum came to visit. She's like, why do you have a weird American twang? She's like, because my fiance is American. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, no one in Vancouver understands me. So when I moved to the UK, I got to drop all of that and got to really get back to my Aussie roots. But they say that if you've lived in a country until you were 18, that's your accent. It's really hard to drop it.
No, I mean, look at me. I have no accent at all.
No.
No.
But that's what they say. I don't know if it's true. But
yeah, we love the Australian accent. We were talking about stress.
Yes.
Well, I don't remember what we were talking about.
I was in Australia. I do remember. Yeah. So I remember going into the doctors, and so I was going to the doctors when I was burnt out. This is 10 years ago. Something that I find really interesting about burnout, though, it's not a new thing. It's been around since the 70s. A guy called Dr. Herbert Freudenberger. I just really like his name. He came out and said he was going into these corporate companies, seeing these type A professionals who were getting sick, having heart attacks, but at the age of 40 and 50. He's like, what is going on? Why is this happening? And so he then talked about how burnout was this phenomenon that we were seeing. This is back in the 70s. This is 1974, 1976. He actually wrote a book about burnout back then. So this isn't a new thing. It just didn't become the World Health Organization didn't make it a diagnosable syndrome until 2019, like I said before. So 10 years ago, or maybe a bit over 10 years ago now, when I was going to the doctors and I had all these really vague health issues, like gut health issues, cold sores, like I woke up one day and my left hand was 3 times the size of itself and I couldn't make a fist for 6 weeks. I would be going into the doctors going, this is like my 10th visit, like what's going on? They would just like really nonchalantly go, oh, you know what? You're just a bit stressed. Just don't stress. And I'm like,
not gonna believe that.
I'm not gonna believe.
I'm here. I'm talking to a doctor.
Yeah, it was one of those moments where I was like, and I'll never forget it because I was like, yeah, but I run on stress, and I've never had a health issue before. But when I looked back, I'm like, yeah, you did. Like even in your teenage years, like I got the shingles the first time when I was 18.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, you did. I just didn't know. I didn't really understand what was going on.
80% of all doctor visits that diagnose you something are caused by stress, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's massive. And the reason for that is because stress causes inflammation or it dysregulates your inflammatory system, right? And so if you're not having an appropriate inflammatory reaction, inflammation is at the center of every single disease. Cancer, diabetes, obesity. All related to inflammation.
Pain, muscle pain. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's all inflammation. And so I would say majority of health issues that we see today is based on stress, young and old. But I think what's happened is that as the years have progressed, we're seeing people younger and younger getting sicker from stress, which were previously not happening in previous generations. And we're seeing a huge influx of it now. We're seeing, you know, like I said, gut health issues, like all these crazy health issues. And I think, and that's what made me really want to get into doing, like, you know, when I set Get Your Shit Together, like 6 years ago, when I set up Get Your Shit Together, I was like, I can't be the only one that's been young. Because we all hear about the 50, the 60-year-olds, oh, they died of stress, they had a heart attack because they were so stressed. And you always, the image that I had in my head, it was these like, you know, 50, 60-year-old lawyers and doctors, these really like important, prevalent people, and we'd put them on a pedestal. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, well, I'm not like them because I'm only 24 and I'm just a recruitment consultant. Like I'm not some high-flying businessman. I'm just trying to make a living in this world kind of thing. And I was like, I can't be the only person my age, or if not a little bit older, struggling with the same health issues. And I remember it really pivotally. I was like 27. And I remember everyone always said stress is the number one killer. And I think we've heard that before. Everyone's kind of heard that. But it never really made any meaning. There was no like, it wasn't in my DNA at that stage. It was just a knowledge. I hadn't made it a part of me. And I realized at 27, I couldn't walk up and down stairs. My knees were swollen. My hips were swollen. My hand was swollen. I had bloody cold sores all over my face that made me look like Shrin Baratheon from Game of Thrones. I was having like the shingles all the time, crazy flus, crazy health issues. And in that moment, I remember sitting there thinking, you know, I'm 27. I say that my joints hurt because I'm old. I don't know why I thought that, but I did. I guess I felt old. But I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, if I'm 27 and I'm dealing with all these health issues now and they're progressively getting worse, they're not getting better, they're progressively getting worse. The only time they got better was when I would take 6 months where I couldn't work. It wasn't because I didn't want to, I couldn't work. I physically couldn't do anything. That was the only time I felt better physically. I was like, I can't live my life like that. That's not the way the world works. Like, we love to just lay on the beach all day and do nothing, but my brain wouldn't let me do that, nor would society. But I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, I'm going to be dead by the time I'm 40. Or I'm going to have no quality of life by the age of 40. And I said, and I think there's so many people living like that.
100%. And the problem is stress can be valuable sometimes to produce the wrong result. It's not the result we want. We don't actually want to live a life where you know, you're so successful, but you're killing yourself. And we never really stop to think about that.
Yeah, I think it's just we get taught what success is, or we create a perception of what success looks like, feels like, you know, what it means to us. But at what cost? Everything you do, there's a cost. So you've got to figure out what's worth it. And I remember in that moment, I'm like, it doesn't matter. Nothing is worth my health, because what's the point of being successful, in quotation marks, without my health, because I can't do anything.
So what changes should people do?
Okay, there's so much people need to do. I'm joking. There's like the first thing that I would tell people to do, and I think the easiest place to start, and this is where I start with every single one of my clients because it's the tangibles. Because I've learned a very big lesson with working with people I work. You have to give them tangibles. Make sure you don't sacrifice your sleep. If there's one thing that you want to walk away today to change, make sure you do sleep. Make sure you get enough sleep, good quality sleep, so 7 to 9 hours of sleep. That's going to physically, mentally, and emotionally just give you a bit of a reset. So,
but that's not so straightforward, is it?
It's not straightforward.
Yeah.
So the dilemma with sleep, because if you're anxious, you can't get to sleep, right? I would, in all honesty, I know you said this was a high-level meditation, but one thing that I have found the most helpful thing for me to manage my insomnia, all that, was to meditate on my thoughts.
To clear your mind. So I just recorded my bedtime stories. Finally, people have been asking me for this for years, right? A meditation for sleep, basically. Yeah. I just recorded that last week. And believe it or not, so it's 3 sections. The middle section is about relaxing your mind and relaxing your body. And relaxing your mind is entirely around get those thoughts out.
Yeah.
Just put them on paper. When they're on paper, they're not in your mind anymore. Just go on.
Yeah. And the other thing that I did with that, and it's not an overnight fix, but it is something that's extremely helpful. When I started doing it, I would have the same thoughts on repeat. And that was really interesting to me. I was like,
yeah.
90% of my thoughts are the exact same thoughts,
exactly.
Right? But that's what you have to do. I always say, like, if you struggle to sleep, create space for your thoughts. So don't distract yourself throughout the whole day, because that's what people are doing. They're so stressed out. They're so anxious that they distract themselves through the whole day. They don't even realize they're doing it, right?
Yeah.
I look at the coping mechanisms people have created. It's usually to avoid, to distract, or what I call polishing a turd, where they try to turn everything into a positive, which that's really dangerous. That's extremely dangerous. And I think there's this whole, I'm on a tangent, I'll come back, I promise. If you're constantly polishing a turd, let's say 95% of your world is on fire, right? What does the world tell you these days? Just be positive, don't be negative. Focus on the positive, don't focus on the negatives. There's merit to that. But if you can change the negatives and you're not focusing on the actions you can take to remove those negatives, and you're just solely focusing on the positive, your world becomes so small that you feel bad if you're focusing on the negatives. You feel guilt focusing on the negatives. When you're actually look at it like it's a problem to solve, not something to ignore. But what happens is if 95% of your world is on fire, that means 5% of your world is okay. But that's like looking your house being on fire, looking outside your window going, well, at least my neighbor's house isn't on fire. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Get your shit together.
Yeah.
So that's how I sort of look at it. And I think we've got to be focusing on that. So like use your meditation to clear your mind, focus on the things that you can work on, solve problems, all that kind of jazz, so you can get those good night's sleeps. I would say that meditation is really good in the morning and in the afternoon. I actually use it as a way to finish off from work, to give me that sort of cut the, my work day's ended, my downtime has now started. So you can get all the thoughts out.
Oh, yeah.
I find that really helpful. To help you get a good night's sleep. Don't drink 11 cups of coffee, as Mo said. Limit it to 2.
Yeah, 2 before 10 a.m.
2 before 10 a.m.
Decaf for the rest of the day.
Decaf, yep. Limit the amount of alcohol you have before you go to bed.
Yeah.
That's massive.
Massive. Can I ask you a question?
Of course you can.
Why do people say don't smoke and they don't say don't drink?
Okay. I think smoking has more direct health reactions that we can see. So like you smoke, you get lung cancer, it's bad, you can't breathe. You have all these like really long-term health issues. Drinking is a little bit different. Smoking has also gone from being a really popular thing to do in society to now it's a bit more taboo because they're smoking less, pardon me. Drinking, on the other hand, it's like very cultural. Like I grew up in Australia, I've lived in the UK now. It's a really cultural thing to do. I actually have seen in the last couple of years people drinking less though.
Gen Z in general is drinking
less. Yeah, the millennials and the Gen Z seem to be drinking less.
Yeah.
But I think it's because it's culturally accepted. I think that's the only reason what makes it a bit different is that we've normalized drinking. It's been a massive part of culture.
Yeah.
Watch any movie. It's
Because
very
I don't judge anyone, but because I never drank in my whole life. My dad gave me a glass of wine when I was 11, and that did the trick. It was it was Cairo. It was August. Red wine. I felt like shit. It was like I never want that ever again in my life, right? So anyway, the thing is, I do occasionally smoke a cigar, like maybe once every 2 weeks or whatever, or whenever I feel like it, really. And it's funny for me because I think you should have probably sort of the same level of only when you enjoy it and only when it's in moderation.
Yeah.
Right? That I think should be the message.
Because a lot of my clients that I have, a lot of them are like business owners, founders, CEOs, MDs, and a lot of them I drink to help me take the edge off when I get home because it is a depressant, so it does help. It does make you feel relaxed.
Yeah.
It's only the short-term goals. The long-term thing, the long-term problems is there. But one of the biggest things with the alcohol is the impact it has on sleep.
Yeah.
And I think there's this massive thing where a lot of people have associated, I feel stressed out, I'll have a glass of wine or I'll have G&T or whatever it is. But yes, it'll make you feel relaxed in that moment, but it prevents you from having a good night's sleep, which is actually going to exacerbate anxiety the next day. So it's this really vicious cycle that happens. So one thing that I've actually said to all of my clients, whenever you start working with me, I'm always really conscious to say, the first thing that I really want you to focus on is you cannot drink if you're feeling anxious or stressed. We don't want to create that as a habit. We want to break that habit if that is your habit. But if you are feeling stressed or overwhelmed, you can't drink. That's just, before I burnt out, I started doing that. I got really anxious when I was younger. Always been a bit anxious, but whatever. I was a bit anxious and I remember just don't drink. And I've taken that through. So if one thing that you take out of this is if you use alcohol as a drug, don't. Find other ways to deal with it.
So interesting because that also applies to smoking, believe it or not. So smoking is a drug. It's one of the most frequently administered drugs for smokers because you get 24 of it a day or sometimes more. And, one of the best advice I ever heard about quitting smoking is smoke. Just don't smoke any cigarettes you're not going to enjoy.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's all about joy. If you're in a right place with the right people and you're right, and you may have 3 of those a day, but it's not going to be 24. Most of the time when you're smoking, you're really standing outside in the cold weather, avoiding the rain, trying to pull that drug in as quickly as you can.
Yeah.
And it's, it's all about the context. If you're using it as a drug, it's not good for you. If you're using it for social connection or joy, or whatever form, it works. Okay, keep going. So sleep.
Sleep. So that's a massive one. So obviously the meditation piece, don't drink caffeine, all that kind of jazz, but really focus on getting 7 to 9 hours of good quality sleep. That's a focus. Don't stress about it, but do make that a priority if you've made it something that's not a priority. I always say to people, at least do exercise 15 minutes 3 times a week. Everyone that goes, I'm too busy to exercise, I'm like, you have 15 minutes 3 times a week.
100%.
You can do that.
I always tell them if Metallica shows up in town and you like Metallica, you're going to find 2 hours to go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I, at minimum 15 minutes, 3 times a week. The reason behind that, there is some science behind doing high interval training. So intense interval training. 15 minutes 3 times a week. It boosts, obviously, exercise. We've all heard about endorphins, where it makes us feel good. But endorphins also help lower cortisol. So cortisol's a stress hormone that's going to have these negative impacts on the body, right? So if you can just try and do some type of exercise that's going to help reduce that cortisol that has the negative impact on your physical well-being, you're putting yourself in a bit of a better standpoint, right? Then there's obviously... eat healthy. I can't say as a nutritionist, at my core, I can't tell you not to eat healthy. And the thing is, when I say eat healthy, I think everyone knows, trust me, when I was a nutritionist, people would come to me and tell me the most perfect diet that they're eating, but realistically, they weren't really doing that. Everyone knows what's healthy. So eating whole grain, whole foods, all that kind of stuff. If you are really busy and you're I really struggle to do that, just look at it as 4 categories, right? Ask yourself, Where's my vegetables coming from? Where's my fiber coming from? So vegetables, starchy foods, whole grains, all that kind of stuff. Where's that coming from? Where's a good quality protein coming from? Whether that's animal protein or plant protein, it doesn't matter. Where's your protein coming from and where's your fat coming from? If you can put in all those meals, like good fats, not, good fats being like omega-3s, so like avocados, avocados and omega-3, but avocados, like all the good fats, things like that, fish oils, whatever, pop that in your meal, you're doing a pretty good job, as long as it's not overly processed or that kind of stuff. So they're the physical, tangible things that you can do, right? That's going to put your body in at least some kind of fighting position to make sure that you can manage your stress more effectively. Because if you're exhausted and you're tired, you're not exercising, you're not sleeping, you're not eating well, you don't have the energy to manage your stress. And it takes energy to change your beliefs, change your habits, change your actions, change your behaviors, all of that around stress, right? But once you get the physical strength to do it, build up yourself mentally, right? Really spend some time thinking about, how do I perceive stress? How do I react to stress? What are my beliefs around stress? And then write a list of everything that you have. Like write a list of every belief that you have, every behavior that you've got, and then put a little mark next to it saying it's limiting me, as in it's holding you back, it's not actually making you better, or it's actually bringing you forward. Yeah. And really look at it again.
Yeah.
You're going to have things in there that you think is a positive when you actually that could be a negative. Just be like, call BS on yourself as well. But that would be some of the things that you've got to do. Changing your reaction to stress and changing your perception to stress doesn't happen overnight. It takes a long period of time and you have to work at it. But if you want to be successful for a prolonged period of time and you, without killing yourself, you have to make that, you have to put that at the forefront.
Yeah.
You have to do that. You have to change your beliefs around stress, your perceptions, your behaviors, your actions, your habits, all around that. And it takes time. Focus on one thing. Don't try and do it all at once as well. That's a massive thing.
Yeah, 100%.
Just do one good thing that's going to help you manage your stress. I actually get all my clients to do this. I always get them to write down a list of anything that can take from 5 minutes to 60 minutes that they can do every single day that brings them joy, releases, makes them happy, reduces stress, whatever it is. Have a list, put it next to your desk.
And pick one a day.
And pick one.
Yeah.
Even if it's 5 minutes, it could be as simple as, I'm just going to go sit outside with no noise, no children, and I'm going to enjoy my coffee. Do that.
Yeah.
Like it's not these big grand things that you can do. It's all the little things, like all the little things that cause you stress. It's all the little things that can de-stress, that can increase happiness, that can increase joy.
So I think that the conclusion on this is that it is a choice.
Yeah.
It is a responsibility. It's a duty.
Yes.
It's something that we can do. I want to close with the most obvious part of this. We're both teaching stress and we both feel stressed. Right? There's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
What is important is, where is your threshold? Where are the resources that you have to deal with that stress? And are you going to take charge? Because if you take charge, then stress turns into just pressure.
Yeah.
Right? And really it is all about how much resources do I have as an individual to deal with the pressure that's applied to me. And if I don't have the resources, can I get the resources or limit the pressure?
Yeah.
And don't wait until you're in stage 6 because, hey,
Yeah. Don't wait until you're falling so far into stress. Look at the resources. So ask yourself, do I have the energy? Do I have the time?
Yeah.
Skills, support, recognition of finances.
How do people find you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn, so Katie Maycock. That's the best place so far. I am stepping up my Instagram game. I've been pretty bad with Instagram, but I'm making it a commitment this year to get a bit better at it. So that's getyourshittogether.io. You can catch me if you are a person, like an individual, not a company. If you want some more information, go to getyourshittogether.io. That's the website. If you're a company, I had to be cheeky and I got the B2B side of my business is called GIST, which is the acronym of Get Your Shit Together, but gistwellbeing.com for some more for businesses.
All right. All of you, get your shit together. Find Katie. And I'm really grateful that you joined me today. This was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed myself.
I really did too. For all of you joining me today, I hope you found this useful. As I said, we're going to run a long mini series on stress with the publication of Unstressable. Buy or pre-order the book for yourself and 20 other people that you love. Keep your pre-order receipts. Come join our webinar for those who pre-order on 28th of April. And go to unstressable.com to register your receipt and get your invitation, but also to see what we're doing with the membership of Unstressable. And take charge, because your stress is not the result of the events that happen in your life. It's the way you deal with them and your responsibility to deal with them. I find this very, very useful today. I found it very useful that we spoke about burnout, because burnout is that sneaky part of stress that we let into our life, like Katie said, because of our beliefs. Can change if you really decide to change it. If you liked this, share it with others. Watch it on YouTube if you were listening to it on your commute. Subscribe when you're there. YouTube, this channel on YouTube is really growing. Mo Gawdat Official. Recommend it to others. Rate it 5 stars if you are kind enough on your podcast player. And come again next week. We'll continue our conversation about stress. And take a little bit of time to slow down. Don't burn yourself out. I love you all for listening. And I will see you next time.